When did the last cavalry charge really happen? From the dawn of warfare, cavalry had been ever present on battlefields. But when was their last ride? Against the machine guns of the First World War? The tanks of World War II? Or was it much later than you'd ever imagine? When war broke out in 1914, almost every major European army still maintained large cavalry formations. Britain had 31 regular cavalry regiments, France more than 80, and Germany relied heavily on mounted reconnaissance. Many generals assumed that cavalry would still decide battles, just as it had in the 19th century. The first months of the war tested that belief. On the Western Front, cavalry patrols clashed in Belgium and northern France, but machine guns, trenches, and artillery quickly ended any chance of mass charges. Horses could not maneuver under sustained fire. At battles such as Mons and Ypres, squadrons were destroyed before reaching the enemy. Even so, the horse retained value in other theatres. The war in the Middle East was less mechanized, and mounted forces could move across vast distances. The Australian and New Zealand light horse captured Beersheba in 1917 after one of the last major cavalry assaults of the war. British and Indian units also fought effectively in Mesopotamia and Palestine, where terrain restricted motor transport. The horse also survived beyond World War I. In the Polish-Soviet War in 1919 to 1920, cavalry still dominated the battlefield. At Komarov in 1920, roughly 6,000 Polish Uhlans defeated a larger Soviet Cossack force in what is often called the largest cavalry battle since Napoleonic times. These actions showed that cavalry could still thrive where mechanization had yet to reach. But despite this, its future was clear. The tank, introduced in 1916, and the spread of motor vehicles signaled the end of cavalry's role as a breakthrough weapon. Horses will remain vital for transport and communication, but would no longer be decisive in combat. When the Second World War began in 1939, most armies still kept mounted units, though their purpose had changed. Cavalry now provided reconnaissance and security, while some units were only partially mechanized. Poland entered the war with 11 cavalry brigades, around 70,000 men, about 10% of its army. They were well trained and equipped with rifles, machine guns, and anti-tank rifles. Contrary to popular myth, Polish cavalry did not charge German tanks. The legend arose from the Battle of Korianty on September 1, 1939, when elements of the 18th Pomeranian Uhlan Regiment attacked German infantry resting in the open. The Poles scattered the infantry but withdrew when armoured cars arrived. German and Italian journalists later exaggerated the event in the tale of lancers charging tanks, an image used to depict Poland as hopelessly backward. In truth, Poland's cavalry mostly fought dismounted and remained among its most mobile and effective units. The Soviet Union also relied heavily on horse cavalry, particularly in 1941-42, when mechanization was incomplete. Soviet Cavalry Corps operated across the steppe and in forest of Belarus and Ukraine, carrying out raids and pursuing retreating forces where vehicles could not go. The German army also used horses extensively, not in charges, but for supply and transport. At the height of the war, Germany employed over 2 million horses, and by 1944, even fielded mounted Waffen-SS units and Cossack units on the Eastern Front. Italy maintained its mounted arm as well. On 24th of August 1942, during fighting along the River Don in southern Russia, the Savoia Cavalleria Regiment of the Italian 3rd Cavalry Division carried out one of the most remarkable mounted actions of the Second World War. Facing the Soviet infantry, which had entrenched itself near the village of Isbuscenskij, the Italians found the infantry pinned down by heavy fire. The regiment's commander decided to attempt a full-scale cavalry charge, something already considered anachronistic in 1942. At dawn, around 600 horsemen of the 2nd Squadron advanced in open formation across the steppe. They galloped through rifle and machine gun fire, hurling grenades as they closed the distance. Once among the Soviet trenches, they drew sabres and pistols, engaging in brutal close-quarters fighting. Subsequent squadrons followed to exploit the shock. The speed and violence of the assault broke the Soviet lines. Over 500 Soviet troops were captured, and the Italian position on the sector was secured. Italian casualties totaled roughly 80 men and 100 horses. A surprisingly low figure given the nature of the attack. The charge at Isbuscenskij is widely recognized as the last classical cavalry charge in Europe. It met every traditional criterion. A planned, large-scale mounted assault by regular cavalry regiment using sabres and pistols against a defending infantry force in the open, without motorized or armoured support. It was not a desperate or symbolic gesture, but a calculated tactical manoeuvre that succeeded. By 1945, the horse had nearly vanished from the battlefield, yet one more dramatic charge remained. As Soviet and Polish forces advanced into Pomerania, German defences held firm in several villages along the front. The 1st Warsaw Independent Cavalry Brigade was ordered to seize the village of Schoenfeld. German troops defended it with anti-tank guns, mortars and machine guns on a ridge overlooking open fields. While advancing, Polish tanks became bogged down in the mud, leaving the infantry exposed. About 200 troopers of the 2nd Squadron formed up under artillery cover. As smoke shells landed ahead, the riders advanced. The Germans, assuming no one would attack across open ground, were caught off guard. The Poles overran machine gun nests, seized several anti-tank guns and cleared the ridge. The infantry followed to secure the village. The engagement lasted only a few hours but became symbolic. It was the last recorded cavalry charge of World War II to achieve its objective. For Poland, which had entered the war on horseback and ended it riding in victory, it carried special meaning. While the charge of Schoenfeld in March 1945 meets many of the criteria of a traditional cavalry action, a mounted assault across open terrain, sabres drawn, and an enemy line broken by shock and speed, it is rarely classified alongside other earlier classic charges like Isbuscenskij. The main reason lies in its context. By 1945, cavalry had ceased to exist as an independent arm. The Polish brigade of Schoenfeld was operating as part of a combined Soviet offensive supported by artillery, armour, not as a standalone cavalry formation. The attack itself, though tactically daring, was localised and improvised, carried out to seize a single village rather than decide a battle or campaign. Its success depended heavily on artillery cover and the element of surprise rather than sustained mounted combat. For historians, these factors make Schoenfeld the final mounted cavalry charge of the Second World War, but not the last great cavalry charge in the classical sense. Before we get into the last ever mounted attack in history, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like as it can really help the channel grow, and subscribe for more odd or less known history. Over half a century later, after Schoenfeld, horses once again carried men into battle. After the attacks of September 11th, the United States launched Operation Enduring Freedom to remove the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. The American plan relied heavily on small teams of special forces supporting local allies with precision air power. One of the first to deploy was Operational Detachment Alpha 595 of the 5th Special Forces Group, commanded by Captain Mark Nuche. Their task was to link up with General Abdul Rashid Dostum, leader of the Northern Alliance in the country's north. When the team arrived in October 2001, they found that Dostum's army had almost no vehicles. The mountains, dry riverbeds, and steep passes made mechanized movement impossible. Dostum's men fought entirely on horseback. The Americans adapted quickly. Within days, they were moving alongside Afghan cavalry units, directing airstrikes while mounted. The campaign's climax came in the assault of Mazar-i-Sharif, the Taliban's key stronghold in northern Afghanistan. Taking it would open the route to Kabul and shift the war's momentum. In early November 2001, under the cover of heavy B-52 and AC-130 bombardment, Northern Alliance horsemen attacked Taliban positions across the desert. Witnesses described hundreds of riders advancing across broken ground, firing rifles and rocket-propelled grenades from horseback. The Americans, also mounted, used laser designators to call in airstrikes just ahead of the charge. Each explosion shattered defense lines, allowing the horsemen to close in through smoke and debris. The Taliban positions collapsed within hours. Their surviving fighters fled towards the city. On the 9th of November 2001, Mazar-i-Sharif fell, the first major victory of the war and a turning point in the campaign. Although some accounts describe the attack as a full cavalry charge, it was a hybrid operation, a combination of mounted assault and coordinated airstrikes. Still, it was armed troops advancing on horseback directly against the enemy. In that way, the Northern Alliance attack near Mazar-i-Sharif stands as the last known mounted charge. So what will you describe as the last ever cavalry charge? The 6,000 Polish Uhlans at Komarov? The Italians with sabres drawn at Isbuscenskij? The combined arms at Schoenfeld? Or the AK-wielding Afghans? And check out this video where Americans and German soldiers united to save over 400 horses at the end of World War II.